pick up with the movement lawyers and just even start with the movement lawyers?
Right. Well, the movement lawyers. My sister married a lawyer named Howard Moore, who was very active as a lawyer in the movement. He was SNCC's lawyer, and he also was in law partnership with Horace Ward, who's now a federal judge, and Donald Holloway, who's passed. Holloway was really the great lawyer. And they were following, Howard Moore actually was the 8th black lawyer in the state of Georgia. So that shows you how few black lawyers there were back then. And this happened a little after that, but after the movement. Julian ran for the state legislature, and SNCC took a stand against the Vietnam War, and they asked Julian if he supported it, and he said yes. So the legislature said that he was treasonous and could not be seated, so they kicked him out of his seat. Julian ran again to replace himself, and he won again, but they still wouldn't let him take his seat. So Howard sued, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And Julian told me that he was sitting there with Howard, and the state of Georgia, the Attorney General, presented their point of view, and one of the Supreme Court justices said, "Is that all you got?" And Julian said to Holloway, who was, sitting there with Howard, "I guess we're winning." And Howard said, "Shut up, you fool." We are. And they went ahead and won unanimously, 9-0. And so he was seated in his seat. So, but Howard has took many cases connected with the civil rights cases, and his papers now are at Emory University. So if anybody wants to go there, you can see those papers. Plus my family's papers are there. Some of my family's papers, my father's and my mother's, are at Emory University.
I get choked up every time I jump. Okay. When I finish choking, we're going to talk about Rush Memorial. Okay, so let's talk about Rush Memorial. And I know you, let's see, Reverend Joseph B. Boone.
Right. Well, I have a long connection with Rush Memorial because the grandfather I'm named for, James Bond, was the second pastor of Rush Memorial, and in fact he named the church after the founding pastor. He took over for a man named Rush and named the church. So he lived here when my father was a child in that same neighborhood. It's right across the street from the library where my mother used to work now. But it was in a rural area, and they lived right around the corner from that. And they first moved on Mason Turner Street, but people found out they were black and made them move to closer to the universities, closer to Atlanta University, because there were white people there. And so during the civil rights movement, Joseph Boone was the pastor, and they had lots of meetings there to plan the sit-ins. It's right around the corner from Clark, and right near Morehouse, and right in the middle of Atlanta University. And so it's been a big part of the community for years and years, for over 100 years. And my family's also been in the community for over 100 years, because my father lived there as a kid. And let me see what else. Well, right. James Bond, my grandfather was the pastor. Yeah.
And so they gave office space, did they give that to SNCC or to Atlanta Student Movement?
Atlanta Student Movement. They gave office space to the Atlanta Student Movement. They had meetings there in the sanctuary. And generally were a big part of the movement in that area.
So when they say Atlanta is the city too busy to hate, what does that make you?
Well, it was a publicity line.
That was a publicity line?
Yeah, Atlanta had troubles, but I guess not as bad as other cities. I do remember there was big demonstrations at a restaurant downtown called Leb's, which is right across from where the Rialto Theater is today. They had people in the street, and I've seen a lot of famous pictures from there where people were beaten and, couldn't sit in it at Leb's. And so Atlanta did have its problems. There were other things about Atlanta, though, that really helped the movement. For instance, all the maids that used to go out to the white communities would come down and catch the buses at Little 5 Points, or they'd have to change buses there to go out to the white community to go to their jobs. So students used to go down there early in the morning and pass out leaflets. You could always get to talk to people, let them know what was going on right there, because that's where the black community, the working people, gathered to go out to, take care of people's houses.
Anything else you want to say about SNCC and its impact on the civil rights movement?
Well, SNCC was, I think, the best group in the civil rights movement. There was a difference. Although SNCC came out of Martin Luther King's group, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, FCLC, they were a different group. They were younger and I think more radical. And SNCC had the philosophy that, it was a people's movement and that we were there to help them. So we would go into communities and live in the communities and take a long time. SCLC was more about demonstrations and about following Dr. King. So they would go into a community and demonstrate and then leave. But SNCC would stay. And SNCC also had the philosophy, which I take to a Bob Dylan lyric, which says, "I'm better than no one and no one is better than me." And in fact, all people are equal. And that, everybody had a say and there were no leaders. It was the people that led. So for those reasons, I like SNCC better than SCLC. But, they're both the tremendous champions of freedom and civil rights.
Did you ever get jailed or participate in any rallies or sit-ins or marches? I know you came towards the end.
Yeah, not in Atlanta. I never was jailed in Atlanta. I lived in New York for a while and was arrested at the South African